So guys, welcome to the Road to Fright Fest. It's kind of our yearly sort of interview series to get people, to give people a little bit more knowledge about the films that are screening. I guess obviously, we're here to talk about The Confession, which is going to be screening at Fright Fest. The first question is, how do you guys feel about the selection and the screening?
So excited. Yeah, so excited to I mean, Fright Fest is one of like the biggest horror festivals. I've actually never been, and I get to go this year, so I'm pretty stoked to be able to go. And yeah, I mean, I think, the chance to watch your film in London, if you don't live in London, it's a pretty great kind of opportunity. So yeah, yeah, we're very excited.
Yeah, I think that I'm so jealous that Will gets to go. I unfortunately can't make it, but I think unlike the other screenings we've had at different festivals, being at Fright Fest, which is like purely a focused horror genre festival, the audience in the theater for the screening will be so different, and I'm so deeply, deeply envious of Will getting to experience that.
I mean, well, this is not the first time you've had a film in Fright Fest. You had Demonic, I think it was 10 years ago. What was it about, the confession, the story in it and, that made it the right time for you to return, not just to Fright Fest, but to directing?
You know, it I'd had a bunch of movies between Demonic and The Confession that got really close to being made, and then at the last minute would sort of fall apart. Either financing would fall apart, or cast would fall out, or whatever. So when I set out to make The Confession, it was very much like I'm gonna. I wanted to design something that was sort of like I could like almost like proof it against falling apart. Like we're gonna make this movie no matter what. We're just gonna figure out how to make it. So that was it. For me, it was just sort of like I kind of once I had the idea, started writing the script, I just sort of kind of narrowed my focus on it. It was like we're gonna get this made one way or the other. And then, it's the first horror film I've made since Demonic, and it's the first film I've made since Demonic. So yeah, and then a friend of mine had a film. A friend of mine named Kyle Rankin had a film in Fright Fest, and I was just sort of picking his brain. He's like, "Oh, I'm happy to." He's like, "Oh, that's a great festival. You should look into it." And and so I was like, "Yeah." And I've had a movie there before, so I would love to go back there. So and like I said, I've never been. So for me, it's like the second time a movie's been there, but it's my first time to be there. So yeah, you know what's in store for me more than I do.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is once you go, they kind of that's it. You'll be, even if you don't have a film, you'll be going back year after year. There's so many filmmakers and
Yeah,
actors who just come just
that's what
because.
I've heard. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
And I tell you, for you as an actor, what was it about the character of Naomi that, spoke to you and made you want to get involved?
It was the dump truck of money that Will paid me. Just kidding. Um,
It's called a bribe.
yeah, I was bribed. No, he reached out and I read the script. Well, I mean, my team told me about it and I read the script and then we met and I just responded very naturally to Naomi. Like I just felt very much like a version of myself was put in this insane situation. And so I felt like there was an opportunity for me to play it as honestly as I would react to some of those things myself. And then when we met, we just kind of hit it off in all of the weirdest and probably dorkiest ways. And I think it just kind of felt right. I'd seen Brotherhood and I knew that Will was talented and that he was somebody I wanted to work with. And so it just felt like everything it actually felt kind of like weirdly easy. Like I was like, something's got to give, um, which was made up for with many moments on set. But I think it was a great experience. One of the most, I think, immersive and enjoyable times I've had filming a movie before. And, I just I was just really excited to meet Will and develop a relationship with Will, and the movie turned out better than I thought it would. I learned piano for it and guitar and to sing. Not that you see any of it, Will. But yeah, yeah, it all just kind of happened pretty organically, and I'm glad it did.
When she said immersive, she also like immersed herself in like 50-degree water.
I did.
But at least like I kept that in. That's all in.
Oh, thanks.
And the film is kind of delving into, family histories and secrets. What was it about this aspect that kind of fascinated you to dig into?
You know, I think it's funny because I had I didn't think about it at the time, but I lost my dad in 2020, like right at the beginning of the pandemic. And as I was going through a lot of his stuff, I was like finding things out about him. Thankfully, nothing about him murdering anybody or being involved in his hometown's deep dark secret. But I think that like there was just something kind of interesting to me about discovering something about someone once they weren't around to explain it, once they weren't around to give any kind of color or context to it. I thought that was really interesting. I'm really interested in my own kind of back. The older I've gotten more and more interested in my own background, my own family's history. And I think there's just something that's really kind of we're obviously as humans we're so intrigued by the past. So much of stories are about the past, and for me, I'm like nostalgic in a lot of ways. So like I kind of long for, the things that aren't here anymore, things that were 20, 30 years ago. So I think I think we're kind of all for the most part interested in those kind of things in some way. And then I think storytelling wise, it's just really interesting to have somebody who's trying, she's investigating the situation, she's investigating her family, she's investigating kind of her hometown, you know? And I think, that just seemed like kind of good, kind of fertile, kind of narrative soil to kind of, you know, dig around in.
And where am I? Sorry. They say don't work with children and animals. And, this film has, Naomi has a son. And then also there's goats outside. There's a lot of rats. What was that, experience like kind of juggling, you know, because I mean, just, having a child actor on set then instantly, is a scheduling nightmare, I guess, because they can only work certain hours. How was the shoot?
I'll let Italia answer this, but I will say the children and the main child was great. The animals, not so much. The animals were a little problematic, but I'll let Italia take that.
Yeah, Zach was a total professional. He knew it was up. His mom was wonderful and, trusted Will and Rosie, our producer, and myself, and it was just such an intimate set as well that it felt like a family kind of. So, um, I think that there was no problems with Zach I mean, the biggest problem would be like, he'd pumpkin and have to rap and I'd be talking to, a tennis ball or something off camera, but that's kind of the job description. But the animals, the goat was fine. The
It,
rat, I
I
met
didn't.
some real rats. We never shot with real rats. I think I was more nervous or conflicted about any potential animals in the water that we were shooting in the middle of the night in North Carolina, and they had like built like a fence and like a safety thing that literally blew away within 10 minutes, and we were like, just forget it. Let's go. Let's shoot it. Let's get it done. But yeah, that actually wasn't. I don't think that the most difficult part of the shoot had anything to do with the kids or the animals, luckily. And Zach's he's so good in it. He's so good.
He's so good in
And
it,
he
and he's
plays
like,
younger too. Like he was
yeah,
what, 11 when we shot it or something,
yeah,
and he was like playing like, 7 or 8 or something.
yeah,
So
yeah.
he's young.
Zach was great. Yeah, Zach was great. Like the second what Italia said, Zach was great, and the rats were actually pretty good because the rats we shot real rats so they're all real practical rats, but then we CGI'd them in, so we comped them all in. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if there were any actual rats that weren't comped in. They were all comped in, but they were all real.
Well, we
Um,
had one like toy rat that we tried to like pull through that hole in the wall thing, but that
yeah.
didn't.
We ended up, yeah, we shot it both ways. We shot it with that, and then we shot like a clean so we could replace it, which we ended up doing because it looked like a toy rat. So the rats are great. The goat was pretty good. It's tough to train a goat, I'm told. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah,
I mean, it all ended up working out.
it works great. But I'd say too, like from an editing standpoint, the goat scene was one of the tougher ones to put together in editing, and the way that scene goes down is not at all how I had storyboarded it. So we kind of had that was like the that was the scene we kind of had to find the most in the editing.
Um, and obviously, Italia, being a being a mother, did that kind of help you sort of access some of Naomi's? Because obviously she's quite anxious. There's her son is obviously going through something at the same time she's discovering this secret about her father. So did being a mother yourself kind of help you kind of like hack the code?
I mean, I don't know if I had hacked any code, but I feel like it definitely just innately felt like my reactions were sort of more instinctual rather than, really having to think about what, you know, my mom reaction first just naturally would happen in a scenario like that. So it was just easier to decide what to do with my performance in each of those scenes because I imagined it, being my kid. And so, and even with like the sweeter stuff, like the bedtime scenes or, teaching piano, like that, just that level of comfort, I think maybe before I had a 5-year-old that I wasn't, I don't know how comfortable I would have pretended to be with a kid, or like, you see sometimes people will like baby talk like a 10-year-old on screen and you're like, okay. And so I just like I'm curious what it would have been like had I not, because I don't think I never played a parent before being a parent. But it all like I said, Zach and I got along really well. We were playing chess in between scenes and building marshmallow popsicle stick houses, I think was one of his things with his teacher. And so it just like it was all very natural and easy and we just had a good time with it too. And I think a lot of the moments there were just some of them probably weren't even scripted and we were just messing around um and yeah, so I'm grateful that I had that experience, but it also made the terror much more elevated and amplified because there's more than just yourself at stake. And that's what really scared me when I was thinking about it. And I'm, Naomi, of course, but also the character, and I'm sure we'll get to this, but she doesn't really believe what's going on at first. And it's not only the battle within herself of am I willing to believe this to try and stop it? Is it safe for me to even believe this when my son is at stake? Because I don't know if I would be able to in that situation. And luckily, the words told me what to do in that. But I feel like that is a really tough thing to negotiate between what you believe and what risk you're putting your child at based on the choice you make because of those beliefs, if that makes sense.
Hmm. I guess it's also got some like, weird, I guess, parallels in a way with, real parental decisions, like, the whole do you vaccinate your child or do you not vaccinate your child? It's kind of it's that thing is like, if I do this, then, if I vaccinate them, then they should be safe. But then, if I don't, what does that mean? So it's as much as this is and that's a great thing about horror, as much as this is a horror story, there are so many other things going on that can be read within them, and I guess that's just one of those sort of examples of a big parental decision, because that's all being a parent is. It's just making a lot of decisions that are going to affect another human being, and it's terrifying.
Oh my
Yeah,
God,
and you
I know. Honestly, every time I'm like, you research the bananas out of even just being pregnant to be like, if this kid comes out with an extra foot, I'll be like, oh my gosh, it was that one sushi roll I ate or something, and then you do everything you think you can that is right. And then parenting, all the decisions you make, you're like, okay, if he grows up and he is a serial killer, at least I know I tried my best. You know what I mean? And then everyone's like, you're such a good parent. I'm like, no, no, this is for my peace of mind. It has nothing to do with his well-being. It is so that I can go to sleep at night when I'm an old lady.
Were you going to say something?
Um, I resonate with all that. I have two kids and I resonate with all that. And no, it's even even like little things like, if you're, like I grew up playing sports, and like so in our family it's like, my kids don't love sports, right? You know what I mean? So should they try it? If they don't like it, do you keep them in it? Do you pull them out? It's sort of like you think about these things because you don't want, like Italia saying, when they're our age, I don't want them to be like, I could have had a normal life, but you made me play soccer and I hated it, and like whatever it is, like you don't, there's no roadmap, and you don't know what the right choices are. A lot of times, sometimes you do, but a lot of times you don't, and we're kind of all doing our best, I think.
Well, and you're doing what you think is right based on like what the studies are saying and what you're reading and da da da. And then literally one day it'll be like, turns out water's not so good for you. And you're
Like,
like,
oops, yeah.
great. And you're like, well, you know what? Jesus, take the wheel.
Thanks, guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the film does bring in some elements of quite an old kind of fairy tale, I guess, is the fairy tales. Everybody thinks, they're all sweetness and light, but you kind of get into the origins and, the real version of the story, and they're terrifying. And, this one, in the confession, it's one that hasn't really been used too much, I don't think. And I just feel that when you read the story, it is already horror. It's not like,
Yeah.
something like Cinderella where you can maybe introduce some horror elements into it. The story here is of of people and particularly children vanishing. It just strikes me as strange that more filmmakers haven't kind of tapped into this story before. Why do you think that might be?
I think it's a great question because once I thought of it, I was sort of like, I was hoping that was the case. Like, I was hoping that more people hadn't tapped into it so that we could do it, because it was sort of like, if there was a big movie that came out last year using the fairy tale that we're using, I would have been bummed because we would have had to change it. But yeah, obviously, like you said, it's a creepy story, like so many, kind of sort of the fairy tales. When you get down to it, they're kind of there to scare kids and warn kids. Don't go into the woods, don't do this, don't do that. Um, but yeah, I once I kind of thought about it, I was like, gosh, this is really creepy. And like it was also interesting too, because we're talking about the Pied Piper. I don't we can talk about it. We don't have to keep it hidden, but it was interesting because like it's kind of this in some ways like there's like the Disney cartoon and it's kind of this cute thing, and then you think about it, you're like, no, this is a guy using music to lure children away. That's about as creepy as it gets. And then also it was really interesting. One of the things I found out sort of going through it is that people, especially younger than me, weren't as sort of knowledgeable about that fairy tale. They were, and they didn't really, like a lot of people like, oh, rats. They didn't know rats were involved in it. So it was just interesting to kind of revisit um, this fairy tale and something that to me was always kind of creepy and, but hadn't really been, I explored a lot.
And I guess sort of my final question for you both, Fright Fest attendees are working out their schedules and trying to decide what they're going to watch when. Why do you each hope that they put the confession on their lists?
Because it's a super fun, super scary movie that I think they'll enjoy.
I think so too. And obviously I'm biased, but it's the perfect length of time. It's not, it's an easy watch, and even though it asks some pretty deep questions, it doesn't try and force you to believe any which way. It has many different answers within it. It's a great popcorn movie, and if you want to have discussions about it, there's plenty to discuss. Um, I mean, it's a good time. It's a good time. you know, my dad's the harshest critic, and he was so pumped to see me get absolutely mangled.
Nice. Well, thank you guys for your time and best of luck with the screening.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, Kat.